How to sew on a button. Today we're going to be sewing on a 4-hole button. Now I have the directions papers, and they are written out 1 through 5 step by step on how to sew on the button, but I'm also going to be demonstrating each of these steps. Okay, so the first thing it says is to thread a needle using a double thread, and arm's length is sufficient. So to do that, you're going to take your regular thread and get an arm's length of thread. So I would suggest going to your shoulder and extending your arm, the other arm, as far as your arm can go, and then you cut a piece of thread. So you're going to use regular thread when sewing on a button. Now, you won't need a needle threader for this because it should go right through the eye of the needle without any problems. So I'm going to be using a larger eye needle, but you can see that you don't need to use a needle threader because it just goes right through the eye of the needle without a problem. Now I'm going to be using a thicker thread because my button is a bit larger. So you're going to take your thread and thread your needle, and then take both of the ends, which I will show you here in a second. Let me put this red coloring so you could see this a little bit better. Take both ends, I've got a really long piece of thread because I've got a large button. Take both of your ends together and then knot them as one piece of thread. So you take them and then do the same knot as we did on the stitch card. Wrap it around your finger and roll it off and pull. So you should get a big fat knot at the end. Now, the next step of the directions say to come up where the button is to be placed. So we're going to use this piece of fabric, and we're going to bring the needle up through where the button is going to be placed. Now everybody's going to learn how to sew on a 4-hole button, and this is a very large 4-hole button, and this is just for demonstration purposes. You are then going to take the needle after you came up through your fabric, and now you're going to just bring the needle up through the eye of the button. Now, you can do one of two things. You can sew the button so it looks like an X, and I have a little demonstration. Or you can sew them so that they're side by side. So the thread is going here and then over here. This is an example of an X. You can see that the threads cross over. They are not side by side. But for demonstration, it's easier to demonstrate the side by side. So now I'm going to take the needle and come down the next dot there. Now, before I go any further, I need to show you, we need to create a thread shank underneath the button. Now, on the paper, it says to put a straight pin, so don't forget to do that on your button because you're going to be actually using a smaller button that I have. I am going to be using this to create the space that I need underneath the button. Now what we're trying to create, what we are trying to create is the space underneath. Now this would be considered a shank button because it's got the little knob underneath. So this space here is what we're going to be creating in thread. So these are two different types of buttons, but they both have the little shank on the end. Now I've got a coat to actually show you the purpose of this. On this coat, you'll be able to see that these buttons have the thread shank underneath. That is what we're going to be creating. And the whole purpose of this is so that when you button it, the button isn't smashed down against the coat. So when I take the button and I button the coat, and you can see that there is room underneath. If I did not have this space under here, the button, you wouldn't have the room, and eventually it could put a hole in the coat below the button because there's just not enough space if I didn't have that thread shank underneath there. Now a pin would not work for this. I would probably have to use maybe a toothpick, a large toothpick, or even take two toothpicks and put them underneath it to create the space. But for the buttons that you're going to do for your pin cushion, a straight pin will work fine. Okay, for the demonstration button, I need to use something a little bit bigger because the button is so much larger than you would wear. Now, we've come up and we came back down and we secured, I have a pencil here, a marking pencil for this. Yours will be a straight pin. And now it's like doing a circle where you're coming up one and coming back down in a circle. You never want to come up and around like this because then you're going to have thread going along the outside and you'll have to cut it and start over. So you're going to do this side 5 times. And it's just up one and down one like a big circle. Now if I was putting a button on a dress shirt, I probably would use a straight pin because it does need a little room. But you need to have something underneath and you want to hold it with your thumb as you're doing this. Now for time's sake, we'll say that I've done this side 5 times. The next step is to go through the next group of the buttonholes here. Now if I was coming up through and I wanted to do the X, instead of going this way, I would come across here. So it would be in a shape this way. And then I would do this side 5 times instead of 5 times this side. Okay, so it's either one or the other. You can't do both. So either do it this side 5 times or in an X sideways 5 times. Okay, once you've done the 5 times, then you cross over underneath so that you're not seeing any threads going across here. And now you're going to do the next set 5 times. Make sure you pull so that your thread isn't looped up on the back side. You may even want to check it to make sure that there isn't any loops or anything. So now you're going to do, like I said, in a big circle 5 times. So I've already done 2, 3, and we'll just say I did 5 on the side also, just for time's sake. Once you have done your 5 here and your 5 here, this is where you need to remove your straight pin, or whatever you're using to create the space underneath your button. Remember, we're going to create the space between the button and the fabric. So here you're going to remove your straight pin. Now we need to get in between where that thread, see how loose that thread is here? We need to get underneath the space. Think of the button as a piece of bread and the fabric is a piece of bread, and in between here is the peanut butter layer where the thread is located. This is where we need to get. So we're going to take our needle and we're going to come up where the peanut butter layer is. So instead of going all the way up through where the button is located, we're coming up through in between. So instead of going all the way up through, I'm just sliding it in between. Now, remember, this is a piece of bread, and the button is a piece of bread, and we want to get in between the peanut butter layer. So we're pulling the needle up through, and now we're going to create that shank inside, in between the button and the fabric. So you're going to take your thread and wrap it. This is where you're going to wrap it 5 times. So you're going to take your thread and wrap it tightly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we're underneath the button. We're in between. We're in that peanut butter layer. We want to go back under that peanut butter layer. A lot of people want to do this. They want to take their needle and come down this way. What happens is, if you do that, the thread is going to be on the outside, and that doesn't look right. You want the thread to be hidden. Don't go down the buttonhole. Go back where you came up through. Go back right underneath here. You've got your button, the piece of bread, the fabric is the other piece of bread. We're in between the peanut butter layer, and we want to bring the needle back through. So we're going to go on the back side of the button. And there we are, we're on the back. There is no thread going on the other side of the button. And now, just like you did on your stitch card, we need to knot it. And we're going to knot it the exact same way. We're going to go through the fabric. Or through the threads. And leave a loop. Again, just like you did on your stitch card. Go from the outside up through the middle and pull. And because it's a button and you don't want your button to fall off after all that work, I would suggest doing your knot 2 or 3 times. Again, leave your loop, go from the outside up through the middle and pull. Got a little loop there. And then if you want, you can do one more so that your knot doesn't come out. And then you get a pair of scissors and cut your thread. And then once you have done your sample button, you can have it checked and then pick out your buttons, and then you can begin working on your pin cushion after you have done your sample button.